The morning sun caught the chrome of my father's Harley like a flashbang. 1 second, the garage was quiet, the smell of motor oil and fresh coffee mixing in the cool air. The next, there was a shadow in the driveway and a knock sharp enough to make the tools on my pegboard tremble. I opened the side door, phone still pressed to my ear. "Yes, sir, I got the procurement documents pulled," I said to the state attorney on the line. "The bid numbers don't add up. Somebody's skimming off the top." And then I saw them. Connie Thornfield, HOA president in heels that never touched grass, standing in my driveway like she owned it. Next to her was Bradley, 16 going on 30, with that swagger kids get when nobody's ever told them no. She didn't wait for me to finish my call. "Mr. Bellwether," she said, "all sugar and steel. We need your motorcycle keys. Today." I blinked. "I'm briefing a prosecutor about government fraud. You mind giving me 5? Bradley smirked like I was the one being unreasonable. "Mom says letting me take it to prom would show real community spirit. Everyone chips in, right?" My thumb tightened on the phone. The attorney's voice kept talking in my ear, but all I heard was the echo of my father's laugh. The man who'd rebuilt this Harley twice before Agent Orange rebuilt him into a statistic. Dad called it the only thing in life you can fix with your own 2 hands. I'd spent 3 years restoring that bike after his funeral. It wasn't a toy. "Let me call you back," I said into the phone, hanging up without waiting for a response. "Run that by me again." Connie tilted her sunglasses down, eyes glinting like polished glass. "It's for the good of the neighborhood. You know, sharing is caring. That's what we expect from quality residents." The word quality landed like a slap. I'd heard it before in her HOA newsletters. Code for people who looked the part, talked the part, and never parked anything with an engine outside a showroom. I stepped closer, close enough to smell her perfume over the faint gasoline tang on my gloves. "You're asking for my keys?" "Not asking," Bradley cut in, chest puffed. "Mom says you can't just keep something this cool locked up. It's selfish." I couldn't help it, I laughed. Not the friendly kind. The kind Marines make when someone points an unloaded gun at them and calls it a threat. Connie's smile faltered. "This attitude isn't going to help you, Mr. Bellwether. The board's already discussed your situation." Situation, like my life, was a broken appliance she'd spotted on a curb. I leaned against the doorframe, calm but cold. "You might want to walk away before you embarrass yourself." Her phone appeared faster than a sidearm. "You're refusing to cooperate? That's a violation. I'll have to escalate this." She actually dialed 911, right there in my driveway. While I stood in grease-stained jeans holding a torque wrench, while the Harley sat gleaming behind me like a shrine to everything my father believed in. Work hard, ride free, never bow to bullies. The operator's voice carried just enough for me to hear. "What's your emergency?" Connie's tone turned breathless, scared. A performance she must have rehearsed in her bathroom mirror. "Yes, I'm at Willowbrook Estates. There's a dangerous man threatening me in his garage." Bradley smirked again. That was the moment I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was an opening move. A diesel truck rumbled past at the end of the street, the kind Connie pretended not to see when it belonged to her friends. Somewhere down the block, a lawnmower droned, the hum of normal life that never quite reaches a battlefield until it's too late. I slid my phone into my pocket and stepped into the sunlight, torque wrench dangling at my side. "You just made the worst call of your life," I said, my voice steady as a rifle bolt. "Because if 20 years in the Marines taught me anything, it's this: bullies don't stop when you back down. They stop when you stand up." And I just decided to stop standing alone. The squad car rolled up 10 minutes later, lights flashing against manicured lawns and mailboxes that all looked the same, except mine, which now had a Karen-shaped shadow painted across it. Officer Ramirez stepped out, hand resting near his holster out of reflex. He'd seen my face around, veterans breakfast, church fish fry, but procedure's procedure. He gave me the polite cop squint. "Morning, Tank. We got a call. You want to tell me why your HOA president says you threatened her?" I gestured to Connie, who was already mid-performance. This man was aggressive. He waved a weapon at me. She nodded toward my torque wrench, as if it were an axe dripping blood. Bradley threw in a theatrical shiver for good measure. Ramirez glanced at my hands, still slick with motor oil. "Really? That wrench?" He didn't look convinced, but he took notes anyway. I knew better than to mouth off. Marines learn fast that arguments in uniform or out never end well roadside. So I told it straight. No shouting. No excuses. When they left without cuffing me, Connie's perfect smile cracked just enough to show the steel underneath. "This isn't over," she hissed, low enough for only me to hear. "You'll learn to play by the rules." Rules. That word rattled in my head like a loose bolt as I went back to work in the garage. Dad used to say, every machine tells you when it's about to fail. You just have to listen. I was starting to hear something in Willowbrook Estates, the faint grind of something corrupt chewing through the neighborhood. The first letter came the next day. A notice of violation tucked neat as a parking ticket under my front doormat. Alleged improper vehicle storage. A $150 fine. By Friday, there were 3 more. Grass too high. Garbage can visible. Excessive noise from mechanical work. I measured my lawn with a carpenter's square, 2 3/4 inches, exactly under the limit. The garbage truck hadn't even passed when they claimed I'd left the bins out too long. And noise? I've been tightening bolts, not running an air raid siren. Something was off. Too fast, too targeted. Like someone had drafted the paperwork weeks ago and just changed the name. Saturday night, Elena Rodriguez knocked on my door. I'd met her twice, once when I jump-started her car during an ice storm, once waving to her twins as they pedaled past on their bikes. She stood on my porch, now holding a plate wrapped in foil. Tamales. The smell alone almost broke through the anger boiling in my chest. "I've seen this before," she said, voice quiet but steady. "You're not the first one Connie's gone after." We sat at my kitchen table, the hum of the fridge filling the silence between us. She told me about the Hendersons, good people who sold their place at a loss after a flood of HOA fines. The Washingtons, who packed up in the dead of night. An elderly couple who vanished after Connie helped them handle overdue assessments. "It's a pattern," Elena said, eyes sharp as broken glass. "She pushes people until they give up or move. And guess who lists their houses every time?" I didn't answer. Didn't need to. Sunday morning, I met Dorothy Walsh, to her friends, a retired paralegal with silver hair and a habit of watching the world like it was lying to her. Elena brought her over, claiming she had a knack for spotting scams. But didn't waste time with small talk. She spread HOA meeting minutes and property sales records across my garage workbench like evidence at a crime scene. 3 homes in the last year, she said, tapping the pages with a red pen. All fined heavily. All sold below market. All handled by Connie's real estate firm. The smell of motor oil and percolating coffee filled the air as we pored over the paperwork. I wasn't just fighting a nosy neighbor anymore. This was an operation, polished, rehearsed, and profitable. That night, I sat alone in the garage staring at my Harley. The black paint gleamed under the overhead light, every curve a memory of Dad's calloused hands and late-night repair sessions. Connie wasn't just harassing me. She was trying to turn my father's legacy into leverage. I slid my phone out and scrolled to a number I hadn't called in months. Sarah Aiden, housing discrimination attorney. She'd once told me, "If anyone ever targets you because of your service, call me first." "Sarah," I said when she answered. "Got a minute? I think my HOA president's running more than bake sales." Her tone sharpened instantly. "Tell me everything." And Tank, start writing it all down. Every word, every letter, every whisper. This is how we build a case. I looked at the stack of violation notices on my counter, still smelling faintly of Connie's expensive perfume. My pulse slowed, focused the way it did before missions overseas. They wanted to play by the rules. Fine. I'd learn the rule book better than anyone. And I'd find out who was cheating. The first real shot landed on a Tuesday night. I just finished torquing the last bolt on my truck suspension. Fingers raw, the garage radio humming low with classic rock. When my phone lit up, motion detected garage door. My stomach dropped. I was standing inside the garage. The feed showed grainy night vision at first, a hunched figure fumbling with my side door lock. Not some stranger. Bradley Thornfield, 16 years old, sneakers scuffing against the concrete, a wire hanger in his shaking hands like he was auditioning for a bad heist movie. I stayed still, listening. The quiet hiss of his breath, the metal click of the latch, the faint smell of his cheap body spray drifting in as the door cracked open. Come on, he muttered, stepping in like it was his own house. He didn't see me in the shadow of the workbench. He saw my Harley, my father's Harley, gleaming under the overhead light. And he went straight for it, dragging his coat hanger like a makeshift lockpick. I should have grabbed him by the collar right then. Instead, I froze, marine instincts clashing with something I hadn't felt since Iraq. Wait, watch document. Sometimes the enemy tells you everything if you let them think they're winning. The kid climbed onto the bike, too heavy for him to balance right, and started messing with the ignition. He tipped it just enough to scrape the paint along the tank. A long, jagged scar through hours of my father's handiwork. The sound was worse than gunfire. "Bradley," I said, stepping out of the dark. He jumped like he'd been shot. The hanger clattered to the floor. I was just making sure it was safe," he stammered. "Safe." My voice came out low, steady. Too steady. "From who?" His eyes darted to the security camera above the door. He'd seen the red light. His lip curled, the bravado fading to panic. "Mom said," he stopped, biting it off like a man who'd said too much. I didn't call the cops. I documented everything. Photos of the scratches. Screenshots of the video. His trembling hands. The smell of adrenaline and fear clung to him as he ran out into the night, sneakers slapping pavement. By morning, the rumor mill was grinding at full speed. Word spread that I'd cornered a child in my garage. Not that he'd broken in, not that he'd tried to steal a motorcycle. Connie whispered at the mailboxes that I had anger issues, that veterans like me were unstable. It worked. Neighbors stopped waving. Parents crossed the street with their kids when I walked past. And in my mailbox, more violation notices, 4 in 2 days, like clockwork. Elena's voice was tight when she came by that afternoon. "Tank, she's turning the whole neighborhood against you. You gotta hit back." "I will," I said, flipping through the fresh stack of fines. But not yet. Dot appeared not long after, carrying a manila folder fat enough to choke a printer. "Tank, it's worse than we thought," she said. The pages showed property records, a trail of manufacturer violations leading to 4 sales, all run through Connie's real estate agency. 8 homes in 3 years. She's not just petty, she's predatory. That night, I called Sarah again. "I've got a kid breaking into my garage," I told her. "I've got neighbors believing I'm the devil. And I've got a stack of fines big enough to build a bonfire." Her voice sharpened. "Then stop playing defense. Start building your case. Every letter, every witness. And Tank," she paused. "If she's involving her son, this isn't just harassment. It's conspiracy." I looked at the Harley, its tank scratched but still shining. For the first time since Dad died, it didn't just feel like a motorcycle. It felt like a flag planted in hostile ground. That was the turning point. No more polite emails. No more waiting for Connie to overplay her hand. I would take the fight to her, with evidence, not fists. But I didn't know she'd escalate first. 3 days later, I caught Bradley on camera again. Only this time, he wasn't trying to steal the bike. He was crouched by the brake assembly with a wrench, carefully loosening cables. Not random vandalism. Not teenage mischief. Sabotage. The cold realization hit harder than a mortar round. If I'd ridden that Harley the next morning, the brakes would have failed on the first curve. And that's when I stopped thinking of this as an HOA feud. It was war. The day after I found my brake cable sabotaged, I woke up different. Not angry, focused. Anger gets you sloppy. Focus gets you results. I called Detective Morrison at the Sheriff's Department, a man I'd shared a VFW beer with once or twice. "Tank, you sure about this?" he asked after I described the fingerprints, the video footage, the precise way those brake lines had been loosened. "Positive," I said. "This isn't a prank. It's attempted vehicular assault. And you know who sent him." Morrison promised to open a file, but I knew the wheels of justice turn slow, especially when the suspect's mom sits on every town committee with a friend in code enforcement. So I decided to build my own machine. That night, my garage turned into a command post. Elena brought coffee and fierce loyalty, her twins coloring at the workbench while we went over maps of the neighborhood. Dot arrived with a stack of HOA records that looked like they'd been pried from a vault. And Sarah Aiden called in on speaker, her voice crisp, professional, laced with just enough fire to keep us going at midnight. We can hit her 3 ways, Sarah explained. Civil action for harassment, fair housing discrimination for targeting a veteran, and, if we prove financial motive, federal mail fraud for using those violation letters as weapons. Financial motive won't be hard, Dot said, flipping to a page marked with red tabs. 8 homes, all fined into foreclosure. Connie's agency listed every one. 2 of them sold to shell companies she owns. I stared at the names, the numbers, the clean little rows of fraud hiding in plain sight. And for the first time, I felt something heavier than anger, responsibility. This wasn't just about me or my Harley. Connie was running people out of their homes. Elderly couples, single parents, folks who couldn't afford to fight. Meanwhile, Connie doubled down on her smear campaign. At the next HOA meeting, she stood at the podium with crocodile tears, claiming she was terrified of the dangerous veteran in her subdivision. Parents whispered about me at the playground. Someone spray-painted Psycho across my driveway one night, Bradley's handwriting, if I had a bet. Even good neighbors kept their heads down, afraid to become targets. Only Elena and Dot stood openly with me. Everyone else crossed the street, offering sympathetic eyes, but no words. I'll admit it, that isolation hurt more than the fines. I'd spent 20 years overseas, in deserts and jungles, thinking home would be different, safer. Turns out bullies wear polo shirts as easily as uniforms. Late one night, I was sitting in the garage staring at the Harley's scratch tank when Elena walked in without knocking. She saw the look on my face and didn't bother with pleasantries. "Tank, you can't do this alone," she said. "I won't," I answered, voice flat. "But I also can't wait around for a system Connie's already poisoned. If she's willing to hurt me, she's willing to hurt anyone." Elena's eyes softened, but her voice stayed strong. Then hit her where she can't fight back, the truth. We got our break 2 days later, from an unexpected source, Bradley's girlfriend, Madison. 16, nervous as a deer, clutching her phone like it held the nuclear codes. She'd recorded Bradley bragging about missions his mom sent him on, including breaking into my garage and even fixing my bike so I'd crash. When Sarah heard the audio, she whistled. That's conspiracy with intent to harm. Federal prosecutors eat this stuff for breakfast. Still, part of me hesitated. This was a kid manipulated by his mother. I'd seen young Marines follow bad leaders into worse decisions. Bradley didn't need to be destroyed. Connie did. That night, I sat alone at the workbench, listening to Madison's shaky recording on loop. Every word was a nail in Connie's coffin, but it also felt like hammering a coffin lid on a boy too young to understand what he'd done. I poured black coffee into a chipped mug, stared at the garage wall, and made my decision. We'd take her down. Legally. Publicly. No backroom deals. No quiet settlements. Everyone would see what she'd done, and to who. But Connie must have felt the noose tightening. The next morning, 3 more fines arrived. That evening, a stranger in a city truck, code enforcement, knocked on my door with a clipboard, sniffing for violations like a bloodhound. He didn't know I already had proof of his family connection to Connie. The pressure was building. I could feel in the air, same as before a sandstorm overseas. People close their doors, the wind picks up grit, and everything goes quiet right before it rips your skin off. And I knew this storm wasn't going to blow over. It was going to blow through. The Willowbrook Community Center had never been this full. Every plastic chair was taken, with neighbors standing in the aisles, phones raised like they were at a rock concert instead of an HOA emergency meeting. Connie Thornfield walked in wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than my Harley's new paint job. She smiled like she still believed she owned the room. For 4 years, she had. She started with her greatest performance yet. "Friends and neighbors," she said into the mic, voice trembling with practiced fear. "I'm here tonight because I'm being terrorized in my own community by a dangerous man." Her manicured fingers pointed straight at me. "He's threatened my family, intimidated board members, and created chaos in what should be a peaceful neighborhood." A murmur rippled through the crowd, some people nodding, others folding their arms. I stood when she finished, no microphone, no theatrics, just a man with a manila folder and a laptop under his arm. "You've heard her story," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Now you're going to hear the truth. The HOA projector flickered to life. First slide, a timeline. Every violation letter, every fine Connie had sent me in 3 weeks. Then the same pattern for 8 other families who'd lived here before me. She didn't enforce rules, I said evenly. She weaponized them. Connie laughed, brittle and sharp. This is nonsense. I clicked to the next slide. Property sales records. 8 homes. Fined until owners gave up. Sold below market value. Listed by Connie's agency. And here's the money trail. Gasps now, whispers growing louder. I kept going. Audio recordings from Bradley's girlfriend, his voice bragging about missions to harass me, about fixing my bike so I'd crash. The room went cold. Even Connie's supporters were staring at her now, their faces draining of color. This wasn't just harassment, I said. This was a coordinated criminal scheme. And it's not just my word against hers. I clicked again. Video footage of Bradley in my garage, loosening brake cables. High definition, time-stamped. Fingerprints matching. I didn't look at the boy, standing in the back with his lawyer, eyes fixed on the floor, because this wasn't about destroying him. This was about stopping the person who'd turned her own son into a weapon. Connie's mask cracked. That's doctored. He's lying. You're all lying. No, I said, sliding the final page of my folder across the table toward the front row, where Detective Morrison Saturday. That's your signature on HOA financial transfers to a shell company you own. And that's conspiracy, mail fraud, and racketeering. The side doors opened. 2 federal agents walked in, calm and deliberate. The room fell silent except for the squeak of their shoes on tile. Mrs. Thornfield, Morrison said, rising to his feet, you're under arrest. Her designer heels scraped against the floor as she backed away from the podium. This is ridiculous. I'm the victim here. I built this community. No, I said quietly. You bled it. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed louder than any applause. Phones flashed like strobe lights, capturing her stunned face as agents led her past stunned neighbors. In the corner, Jim Krotsky, her code enforcement buddy, went pale as another agent approached him with a warrant. The dam broke. People started shouting, not at me but at Connie. The same neighbors who'd crossed the street to avoid me now demanded answers from her as she was led away. Some were crying. Others were filming, already posting to social media. Bradley stood frozen, tears streaking down his cheeks as his lawyer whispered to him. I met his eyes for just a second, not with anger, but something heavier, the kind of disappointment a father gives when a kid follows the wrong leader. Elena put her hand on my arm, steadying me. You did it, she whispered. No, I said, watching Connie disappear through the doors. We did. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Questions, cameras, neighbors rushing to compare their own violation letters. But I stayed still, calm, letting it all wash over me. For the first time in months, the knot in my chest loosened. Justice wasn't loud. Justice was the sound of handcuffs closing on someone who thought they'd never hear them. The neighborhood felt different the morning after the arrests. Quieter, lighter, as if someone had cracked open a window that had been sealed shut for years. No more violation letters stuffed under doors. No more whispered warnings at mailboxes. Just the ordinary sound of sprinklers ticking across manicured lawns and kids riding bikes without parents glancing over their shoulders. Connie's empire fell fast. Within a week, the HOA board resigned in disgrace. Emergency elections put Elena in as president and Dot as treasurer. Their first act was simple: tear up every bogus fine, refund every dollar Connie had stolen. When the checks went out, neighbors who had once crossed the street to avoid me walked up my driveway with grateful eyes and awkward apologies. I didn't need the words. Their relief was enough. Bradley's case went to juvenile court. I could have pushed for the harshest sentence, but I didn't. The kid had been weaponized by his own mother, and I wasn't about to break him for good. The judge sentenced him to 200 hours of community service in my garage. At first, he showed up sullen, head down, convinced I'd make him scrub oil stains until his knuckles bled. But I put a wrench in his hand instead. Taught him how to rebuild a carburetor, how to listen for an engine's heartbeat. By the 3rd week, he was showing up early, asking questions, fixing things I hadn't even noticed were broken. One afternoon, After we'd finished polishing the Harley's tank, the scratch now buffed smooth, Bradley looked at me and said, "I didn't know what she was doing to people. I thought it was just HOA stuff." His voice cracked on the last word. I nodded. "You learned the hard way. That's still learning." He smiled for the first time, a real one, not the practice smirk his mom had taught him. 6 months later, Willowbrook Estates looked nothing like the place I'd moved into. We turned the old HOA playground into a memorial garden, funded by restitution from Connie's civil judgment. A space for veterans, families, anyone who'd been pushed out or bullied by people who forgot what neighborhoods are supposed to be. Bradley and Elena's twins planted the first flowers, dirt under their fingernails and pride in their eyes. On opening day, 300 people showed up, some who'd moved away, some who'd stayed, all of them eager to see something grow in soil once poisoned by fear. The Harley sat parked at the entrance, no longer a target but a symbol, chrome catching the afternoon sun. When I fired it up for the dedication ride, the deep rumble didn't sound like defiance anymore. It sounded like freedom. The legal fallout was swift. Connie pled guilty to mail fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering. For years in federal prison. Her code enforcement partner and city council contact went down with her. Sarah Aiden, who'd guided us through every step, told me our case would be taught in law schools as a model for fighting HOA corruption. Janet Kim's news feature won awards. But none of that mattered as much as watching neighbors plant trees together where there used to be nothing but bitterness. Elena and I started seeing each other outside the fight. Coffee that wasn't strategy, dinners that weren't planning sessions. I don't know what you call two people who've gone to war side by side and come out closer instead of broken, but I know it felt right. The night before the memorial opened, I sat alone in the garage, the smell of fresh oil and cool metal filling the air. The Harley gleamed in the low light, quiet and waiting. I thought about Dad, about the way he'd say every machine tells you when it's about to fail if you're willing to listen. People are the same. Willowbrook failed for a while because no one listened. But we do now. The last time Bradley tightened a bolt on that bike, he wiped his hands on a rag and said, "Feels like it belongs to the neighborhood now." I shook my head. No, it belongs to everyone who stood up when it counted. When I rolled out of the driveway that evening, the sun dipping low over the rooftops, I didn't hear the engine. I heard something bigger, a community breathing again. And I knew this wasn't the end of the road, just the first mile of a longer ride.